Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this programme what else could we be discussing other than the surprise general election that will now take place on Thursday the 4th of July. So we'll be asking what is at stake at this general election, not only for Christians but for the United Kingdom. And in this programme today I am joined by Maureen Martin, CEO of Kingmakers UK, together with Melanie Simmons from Heart newspaper. So lovely to see you both. Melanie, I'll start off with you because you have a new edition of Heart newspaper come out. So share with us what our viewers can expect in the latest edition of Heart newspaper.
Well, thank you. Well, the Lord downloaded this to me. The wake-up call, I just saw it after church one day, the picture of the horses and the prophecy which came out from that time, and it is a very obvious and serious warning to the nation, and even non-Christians were referring to the horse of the apocalypse, and the Lord showed me to put the Revelation quote there as well. It is a warning, and on the back of that there's also a minister who, we haven't got the page of this, I do apologise, I'm just going to show this here if we can, thank you, Reverend Jennifer Abigail Lawson-Wallace, who had a good article in the last issue as well, and when the Lord had given her a warning about Britain, and she said we must have a week of prayer, fast and repentance. The Lord told her to call that for the 3rd to the 8th of June. And considering what lies ahead of us, what could be more urgent? We just need the church to get hold of this.
Absolutely, and of course it marks the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings as well,
yes.
When the King called for a national day of prayer for D-Day.
Yes, and we've got a super article here by Pastor John of Strength and the Faithful, and reminding us of what happened when Britain prayed. And like in the last issue of the paper, we had the double page of the World War II paintings, which an artist was led to do because the Lord said to her, a storm is coming. Okay,
excellent. And Maureen, I think this is an exclusive here, isn't it, for Politics Today and Revelation TV, that you've now formed a new ministry called Kingmakers UK. So share with us this new initiative that the Lord has given you to educate the church about the importance of politics and understanding what matters in terms of political elections, but also as Christians, why we have a responsibility to engage in the political process.
Absolutely, Simon. We have such an enormous amount of electoral power, the church, that we must realise how much electoral power we have. So to do that, the Lord just downloaded to me the need for education, to inform my fellow Christians of why it's important to vote, why it's important to understand manifestos and read them, and line that up with the scriptures. So government the way God wants government to be done. And God operates through human agency. We have the scripture that says God puts up one, puts down another, but he does that through human agency, through us. We are his body, we are here to do his bidding, so we must know how to do his bidding in the political arena. And I think a lot of that can come through education, and that's why Kingmakers UK is being birthed, because I want to be the injection that wakes the church up, as it were. So that's the reason.
Good. Well, the church certainly needs an injection. And talking about the times in which we're living in, Rishi Sunak last week called for what was a very surprising general election. I didn't see it coming. I don't think the vast majority of Conservative MPs saw it coming, that he's actually called a general election for July the 4th. So what are your thoughts now that we're in the midst of a general election campaign?
Well, he's obviously used an element of surprise here, because we all expected it October, autumn, right?
Yes.
I was myself preparing for autumn and looking forward to a bit of time of relaxing, and then all of a sudden he calls this election. Maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe he has some internal polls that we're not aware of. However, the general polls indicate that it's going to be a Labour victory. However, in saying that, he does have some maybe aces up his sleeve that we may not be aware of at the moment, because right now there's a split in the Labour Party between the hard left and Keir Starmer's stance on Israel. There's a bit of a rift. Maybe he thinks this is the time to strike, while there's a little bit of instability in the Labour Party. So maybe this is his strategy, maybe not, but it is a shock to everyone. But then he may be thinking of catching people off guard, so that we have to scramble around there's several elements going on here. So we'll see what happens.
Melanie, it's something that I think Keir Starmer is hoping to bank on, and that is kind of the summer bounce, as it were. So when the weather's hot, it's warmer, there's a bit of a good feel factor, but he's also then heavily reliant upon the England team doing well in the Euros to boost the nation, of course, boost his chances of re-election. So what do you think is, in terms of his calculation in actually then calling for a general election, and polling day is what it is, Thursday the 4th of July?
Well, I'd like to think there was a feel-good factor. I think it's other considerations. The first thing which came to my mind last week, well, actually wasn't the first thing, was that about inflation figures, and we had some quite good figures. And let us, going back to what Maureen said, and going back, God blesses the Jews, those who bless Israel, let us not forget that Rishi Sunak had sent a letter around to university chancellors saying about that they had to not allow the pro-Palestinian demonstration to take over their campuses. He was very firm about that. And then the economy had a little bounce. And we've noticed that earlier, a few months ago, during this conflict, when Rishi Sunak did something positive, the economy had a little bounce. Well, not a bounce, a lift. It hasn't gone down again yet. But there's worse to come economy-wise in the autumn. But then when I read during my daily readings, that's when the Lord can get a word in and say, and I often get quite different thoughts. And what occurred to me then was that he had called it just in the middle of last week, when those who are campaigning against the World Health Organization pandemic treaty were at their most active. And the election has completely stolen the show. Now, it is today in Geneva they would have been signing a treaty. I understand they haven't agreed on a text, which is a relief. But that treaty is horrendous. And we have campaigned against that in the paper. Other Christians have done so as well.
Yeah, which hasn't virtually no media coverage at all. So
absolute silence.
That's the problem with this one. I mean, in terms of the election, so let's suppose the opinion polls are right, and the one thing we know about opinion polls is that they can't be trusted, because what people might say to those who are carrying out a public survey is one thing around people, but when they're in the kind of privacy of their own ballot, putting an X on the particular candidate or party, they might actually do something different. So many pollsters have been surprised over the years, but also we've seen divine intervention on many occasions where the Lord has directly intervened in an election, or certainly did during the EU referendum. But considering that Labour is polls ahead literally in this general election so far, tipped to form the next government. Now, if, for example, Starmer and the Conservative Party do lose, then also this is a kind of masterstroke, isn't it? Primarily because with a general election happening on the 12th, that only gives Keir Starmer and the Labour Party 2 weeks before Parliament has to go into a summer reset. Won't be back until September. And the 100 days in office for any government, new government, is the most important, because then it gives them momentum for the rest of the parliamentary term. And literally, Starmer has pulled the rug under the Labour. If that happens, what are your thoughts?
It's possible. That could be a strategy that Rishi has employed in this particular situation. However, in terms, going back to the polls, now, when you have a look at the past by-elections and elections that have gone this year, they've all gone pretty much in Labour's favour. However, when you study and look at the numbers, Labour are not converting Conservative voters. Their electorate are coming out to vote for them. And their numbers are pretty much the same as they were, say, in 2019. What's happening is the Conservative voters are not going to the polls. That's what's happening. Yep. Now, in a general election, I think they will show up to the polls. However, whether they'll vote Conservative or not, that's the issue. They may go UK Reform or some other party. However, Labour are not converting voters, and that's the point. So there may be a bit of a surprise in this election. It may be that Conservatives may not get the actual majority they need, but not necessarily completely lose the spread of the majority, if you like. Labour may not actually get to that number. Similar to what happened to Theresa May when she went to the polls in a snap election. She didn't get the majority, but she had to form a government with the DUP, right? So it's possible something like that may happen. So even though the polls are indicating one thing, must remember, in 2016, when Donald Trump was going to the electorate to be president of the United States, the polls were saying that Hillary Clinton was 19 points ahead of him. 19 points, that's a 20-point spread, and yet he won. So polls are not always that accurate. And as you said, in that election, there are a lot of people who would not say who they're going to vote for. Or they may have lied when asked. So this could be another situation here.
So, you know, in the midst of a general election, I think a general election that no one particularly wanted, certainly not in the summer. But share with us what's at stake, Melanie, for Christians, and what is at stake, do you think, for the nation in this general election? Because for Christians, it's very, very difficult to know who to vote for in this election. And because of Ofcom, we can't say who you should vote for. But it's important to analyse and scrutinise the policies of each political party and see if they stand on a biblical platform or not.
Well, it's very interesting because you're just saying that reminds me of, dare I say, this article in the paper by the Reverend Jennifer Abigail Lawson-Wallace, and she said that after, when Labour was last in power, the Lord showed her that they wouldn't come to power again because of the bills they'd enacted, like legalising Satanism. And it was so wicked, and the Lord wouldn't allow it for a while. So, and that was under Gordon Brown. It's such a big question. There are so many concerns because those of us who are concerned for how Israel will fare are just so aware of the sort of baying hordes behind Keir Starmer. I mean, he said yesterday, he said on Bank Holiday Monday, I have changed the Labour Party. Now, this is a very dangerous thing to say. I mean, even Tony Blair didn't say that. Tony Blair had his attack dog, Alistair Campbell, keeping everyone on message, doing a very slick operation. Now, Keir Starmer, we don't know what deals he's done behind the scenes. He could have said to the baying horde, look, just keep quiet, guys, until we won the election. Because my other big concern is about the way the nation changes. I lived through a Labour government when I was young, and it wasn't so much. It's the social engineering. They bring about changes, not even so much through legislation, but through the feeling that is around. So I'll be quite honest. With the way I speak, I grew up speaking like this. It's not put on or anything like that. But people kind of mimic me when there was a Labour government. And that didn't happen so much under the Tories. I'm not going to change the way I speak. I'm not going to start doing old Etonian Mockney. But there was this kind of different feeling in the air. And what we've been seeing, even under the Conservatives, which I don't think Rishi Sunak has got a grip of, is all these councils have been doing social engineering. They have wasted money on diversity and inclusion officers, paid them handsome amounts of money, when, for instance, in Croydon Council, they had tenants living in substandard accommodation, but they were being educated to think the right things with all these diversity and inclusion officers. And then Birmingham's council went bankrupt. Now, this is under the Tories. So when Labour, if they get in, then all these people with extreme agendas think they've got a green light for their agendas because the Labour Party isn't going to get a grip of them.
Yeah, I think there are many issues that affect Christians. I don't think, for example, the Conservative Party governing party has been very good standing up for Christian freedoms in this country at all. They've definitely tended to lean toward the more liberal, progressive policies, which are very secular humanist and not very different from the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats. I think they have been a lot stronger on defending Israel than the Labour Party, and just got a message through now that Angela Rayner has actually said that if Labour win on the 4th of June, they will recognise a Palestinian state. So we already see the influence of the Islamist vote on the Labour Party and its policies towards Israel. And we know that our nation will be either blessed or cursed whether we stand with Israel or with the Jewish people or not. Which means in terms of foreign policy, this will just bring greater spiritual darkness on our nation, and that seems to be the direction the Labour Party want to take in. And then, of course, there's also that possibility that that the Labour Party could be used as a Trojan horse, and far more dangerous and extremist elements could take out not only the party but the institutions of government. So I think there is so much at stake at this election, but we haven't seen, I think the only party that we are seeing that will probably run on a platform that is actually for the nation state, however much Keir Starmer wants to wrap himself around the British flag or the Union flag, is the fact that our major political parties do not serve the interests of the nation state. And the concept of the nation state is one gone. Despite the fact that we voted to leave the European Union, doesn't mean that our governments are not involved in breaking up the United Kingdom and making us weaker, so that we're more susceptible to actually enter into global corporations. Anyway, that's my take on that one. But Maureen, for example, there's only two men that can win or become the next Prime Minister. Either Rishi Sunak wins election or Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister. What do you think of the two men that will lead our country on the 5th of July, sorry?
Indeed. Well, essentially, from what you just said, Simon, they're pretty much both globalists, aren't they? They're both globalists.
Davos.
So, absolutely. Although, WEF. But Keir Starmer, for instance, one paper put it quite eloquently that the most stable thing about Keir Starmer is his instability. Okay, he's flip-flopped on so many different issues. And this is a problem because this shows he's not really a strong leader. And the hard left of his party are ready and willing to strike. If he becomes the Prime Minister, it's not going to be long before they pretty much take over the party. Because he does not have the fortitude of the leader to keep them at bay and actually run his party the way it should be run for all the people, not just for the hard left. Richie, maybe he's just fed up with being Prime Minister. Maybe I've heard actually an interesting theory about he doesn't want to be a wartime Prime Minister, that there's a projection that we could possibly be at war with Russia by the autumn or by the end of the year. And he does not want to be in that position to have to navigate and negotiate us through being at war. It hasn't happened, since the 1930s and 40s with a major power. He doesn't want that position. So he's calling the election now to get out as soon as he can, so put somebody else in that position. That's just a theory. I'm not saying it's a correct theory, but it's a theory. So between the two, there's not much between the two, unfortunately. But Keir Starmer is not up for the job. I don't think he's going to last long if he does become the Prime Minister.
And what are your thoughts on this one? Latest news in the Telegraph at the moment is the fact that the French have said that they've deployed troops to the Ukraine, only currently in advisory capacity, but we know this is how the Vietnam War started. When the Americans went into Vietnam to support President Diem of the South of Vietnam, to prop up the South's forces against the Viet Cong in the North, and sooner or later America got dragged into that war, sending more and more troops. So the prospect of war is on the horizon. But again, we don't have a Churchill in our midst at this time. We don't have politicians with a moral compass and a calibre to lead our nation into wartime. And also this is very much the result of the fact that our nation has abandoned our Judeo-Christian heritage, and so therefore we're getting the candidates that we deserve, which is part of God's judgment. But when it comes to voting, what are the issues that Christians need to seriously look at? Because not only are you voting for the party leader of each political party, not only are you voting for the party, but because we live, our parliamentary system is constituency based, we're also voting for members of parliament. And surely actually looking at the voting record of our members of parliament and those who want to be our MPs is more important than actually voting for the leader of each party.
Yes,
Thoughts?
Various thoughts. So a big issue we've discussed as well, a big issue for Christians is abortion. Now, happily, the criminal justice bill has been postponed. The can's been kicked down the road, and they're going to bring in radical abortion amendments. In fact, even as we went to press, we're saying, oh, good, it's been delayed till after the recess, and now Parliament's being dissolved anyway, and so that's not happening. So the decriminalisation of abortion up to birth, that has been kicked into the long grass. Another issue which should concern Christians is compensation for the big scandal we've had recently. I must mention the contaminated blood scandal. Happily, that has just gone through. Let's hope or make sure that the Labour Party honours it and pays their compensation. I do have friends who lost their son through this scandal, and they've been through agonies over decades. Then there's the post office scandal as well, and I believe they're also going to be paid out. But I just want to say something, talking about the party leaders though. Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, not only during the Jimmy Savile time, but also when the sub-postmasters were being prosecuted by his officials, presumably. And also when GPs who'd allowed sex-selective abortions they were not prosecuting them, and someone brought a private prosecution and she was landed with a 50,000 bill of legal costs. One girl who had the courage to take on the system. So Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions then. But I agree about Rishi Sunak as well. I mean, that's why I said before the programme, the colours I'm wearing. Pink, so not to be politically biased, pink because we haven't got a pink party yet, and beige because that's what the candidates feel like. I mean, they've got the charisma of an amoeba between them. But as for individual MPs, we've had more Tory MPs, I think it was 72 now, have jumped ship, and I did read that the new MPs who are being selected are anti-Brexit. So where does that leave us?
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? That's what makes it so difficult to actually choose who to vote for at this election. But Christians must engage in the political process, mustn't they? And particularly as your new role as the CEO of Kingmakers UK, you've got a chance to educate our viewers about the importance of voting. That we have to remember that so many people sacrifice their lives for the freedoms that we have today. And so therefore it's a privilege to live in a parliamentary democracy where we can elect our leaders, we can elect our government, they are accountable to the people. So share with us why Christians need to vote on Thursday the 4th of July morning.
It's imperative. Now, as I said before, we are God's human agency on this planet. Whatever he does is going to be through his people. So we must hear and understand the mind of God on the political parties, who God's choice is. It's not always a clear-cut choice. Sometimes there's an element of compromise, but we have to keep the main issues, the fundamental issues, life, from conception to natural death. Supporting traditional marriage. It's the foundation of a part of society. We must have traditional marriage as the basis of our democracy. So some of the fundamental issues is what Christians have to keep in mind when they are looking at the candidates, looking at the parties. Now, I'm not really in favour of looking at the individual candidates. We have to look at the party manifesto.
Absolutely.
So that is what that candidate is standing on. Whether they agree with all of the policies or not, the fundamental policies, what really matters to God is what should matter to the Christian. So they must look at the party manifesto, because you have many Christians involved. The Labour Party's got quite a few, people from my culture, from the church, who actually are members and actually are MPs. But they claim to be Christians within those parties. There's a mismatch. Look what's happened to Tim Farron in the Liberal Party. They got rid of him because he's too Christian. You cannot be an authentic Christian in parties that support certain agendas that go against the word of God. So it's so important for Christians to vote and to get the mind of God on how to vote.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that in this general election, we felt this in the local elections and also in the mayoral elections earlier this year, that Israel will play a major part in these elections. And I believe that the issue of Israel will be the litmus test. And it would be depending where the parliamentary candidates and the party stand on Israel will be determined whether our nation is under a blessing or under a curse. And that is how I will be looking at the prism of this election and looking at the Conservative Party, looking at the Labour and the Liberal Democrats, as well as the Reform Party, as well as the regional parties like Pride Cymru, or in the north, the SNP in Scotland. It will be this issue that I think will define this election. Your thoughts?
Oh, yes. It is for us. It may not be for all the Christians, and it won't be openly for the Labour Party. They won't dare, because they'll have all their pollsters and experts advising them, and they will know not to let the Islamists have a loud voice. They'll just be sort of saying, getting ready to go around the megaphone saying this phrase they say, in their language, God is great, when they have a victory. But they won't be allowed to be saying that beforehand. So, yes, it's a huge concern, but there's also, for us, it is dire, but it's just not going to be an issue for a lot of Christians, and it won't be an issue for the country at large.
Yeah, but it should be, because this is essentially this is how God judges the nation. And we know, for example, that if the Jewish people feel safe and they feel protected, that means that our society is good and our country is good. The moment they're in danger, and they're in real danger now, this really does spell out very, very dangerous and precarious times ahead for us. And currently, if we look at the levels of recorded instances of Jew hatred, certainly since October the 7th, they're off the scale. It's unprecedented. And that's why I think it's important, is it, that Christians really pray into this election and intercede. And maybe this is a period where we need a period of fasting and praying for the nation at this time. Yeah. Your thoughts, Maureen?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to pray is the most important. Prayer is always the first thing. And we need the mind of God on the matter, and prayer is the way we get that. We need to vote our values, okay? And we need to understand what God is saying in regards to those values. Because I said not every party can have everything that's going to line up with your values. But we need to hear from God what He considers the priorities, and not what we consider our priorities. Our priorities are tax breaks. Well, God's not that concerned with a tax break or the immigration policy. What He's concerned about is fundamental issues that when we break His laws, they affect the nation on a whole and bring a curse, like, for instance, how we treat Israel. Because the Bible is quite clear. He's going to judge the nations on how they interacted with Israel. That's going to be His basis of judgment. So it's very important that we understand how all these different parties want to interact with Israel and how they have in the past. So it's so important that we pray and we fast as well in this particular time.
So Maureen and Melanie, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's Politics Day. You've done a great job, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. Yes, we're in the midst of a general election, and so much is at stake despite the apathy, despite the voter indifference. As Christians, we have not only a responsibility to vote, but also to pray and be active during this term, which is a general election. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.